Hello, it's another Wednesday and another time for us to take you around Nigeria to examine issues and developments that touch the lives of Nigerians, made governance more or less impactful, and created hope, happiness, or a lack of them in the course of the week. This is 360 Nigeria. I am Josephine Bitrus. You are welcome. In today's edition, death in the operating theaters, failed medication, injuries to organs, all as a result of fake, adulterated, or expired drugs. Who should be held to account? Corruption in Nigerian Correctional Service. When government threw the doors open over a period of 10 days to expose the rot and seek solutions. Plus, Professor Humphrey Nwosu, when a man of history goes home. That's the outlook for this week. Just remain with us and you'll get all the details. Stay tuned.
Every second, every minute, every day, news is breaking. Events occur and there are new developments. At Signature TV, we follow these stories objectively, bringing all sides without bias, explaining the complex issues, breaking down the numbers, and investigating the issues behind the news. Anywhere and everywhere, near or far, wherever the news is, we will be there. Signature TV. News in your pocket.
Instances, Nigerian medical doctors have lost patients in the operating theater even after doing all the right things. As Nigerians debate who should be held to account for these deaths, the Director General of the National Agency for Foods and Drugs Administration and Control, NAFDAC, Dr. Mojisola Christiana Adeyeye, is recommending the death sentence for dealers in fake, adulterated, and substandard drugs. The cause of many of these deaths. Correspondent Chimeze Zedima weighs in on the many issues connected to the challenges of fake, adulterated, and expired drugs in Nigeria.
Professor Mojisola Christiana Adeyeye raised the alarm. Her life and those of NAFDAC operatives enforcing the seizure of illicit, adulterated and expired drugs were being threatened by those involved in this spread of death in Nigeria's health sector. NAFDAC operators, with the support of security operators, had closed 3 open markets where these drugs are stored and from where they are distributed across the country. Onitsha, Bridgehead, Aba, and Lagos were the 3 guilty markets. Many Nigerians point to Kano as the next necessary port of call.
The operation is an outcome of the strategic partnerships that NAFDAC has made and which is part of the National Action Plan 2.0. During this exercise, NAFDAC succeeded in removing from circulation 87 truckloads of banned, expired, unregistered, suspected falsified substandard medical products from the 3 markets. Right now, we have screened over 7,000 shops, and it's still ongoing as of today. A database of these shops and the offenses committed has been created for further steps. More than 40 arrests have been made, which will be followed by prosecution. With the signing into law, the Proceeds of Crime Act, POCA, for forfeiture of assets, the assets recovered from suspects will be treated as proceeds of crime after their conviction by the courts.
The challenge of fake, illicit, adulterated, or expired drugs is a global challenge. Better organized societies have dealt with it by sanctioning countries where these drugs are manufactured and exported. Drugs are also made across the counter commodities to be imported, distributed, and sold by non-professionals. In Nigeria, however, drugs are imported, distributed, and sold like any other article of trade by anybody who has the money or space to display them.
There are agencies that are responsible. NAFDAC is responsible for the product. Why the pharmacy council, that's why they're working in collaboration. We, the pharmacists, are being regulated by the Pharmacy Council of Nigeria, that's PCN. When it comes to the product, NAFDAC is responsible for regulating the product. We have the patent medicine store, that's the PPMV, that is being regulated by the Pharmacy Council, and those ones are only licensed to sell non-ethical drugs. The ones enforcement will go periodically to inspect their premises to ensure that they are licensed to sell only whatever that that is OTC. And then for the pharmacy, there's a logo. That's why we advise the general public that whatever premises you go to, there's a neon sign with a pharmacy logo. And will I say, whichever premises you go to and you don't see that neon sign there, that premises is not licensed by the Pharmacy Council. And we have our annually we are being licensed. The license covers us for 1 year. And they are so strict that at the end of the month, second month of the year, if you're not ready, if you've not gone for the renewal of your annual license, there are sanctions. You pay a fine.
Look at it from the chain supply. Who are the people that are involved in the chain supply? From the manufacturer to the distributor to the retailers and then to the healthcare providers, to ensure that the drugs that are being administered to patients are genuine drugs, they are not expired drugs. You have instances where drugs have expired, and what do we see that some of the people involved, I would not want to be mentioning names, some of the people who are involved in this chain line, what they do is they will just change the package, change the dates to make it look as if the lifespan of that drug is still valid.
The current effort to tackle Nigeria's fake drug scourge will not be the first effort. It will also not be the first time Onitsha Bridgehead and Lagos markets will be closed on account of fake medicines. In 2007, on March 6th, when Professor Dora Akonyili was the Director General of NAFDAC, the market was shut down on account of same fake drug challenge, and she only escaped assassination by a hair's breadth.
I ate, I walked NAFDAC. It was my life. Yes. We can turn around any institution, any agency, any ministry if we are determined to do that. If we are determined to shun money, if we are determined to face the consequences of swimming against the tide, because it is swimming against the tide, there are consequences. There will be verbal attacks and there may be physical attacks. Everything boils down to corruption. And corruption is not just about giving or taking money. Fake drug is such a bad news. It is mass murder. Early 2001, over 41% of drugs in circulation were outrightly fake. Over 68 were unregistered. So we were in a crisis situation. It was not only drug, what of food? Yes. What of baby milk, infant formula that was cassava flour with sugar and a little milk. Professor, can you imagine how many babies that died? When I came into NAFDAC, first of all, I wanted to succeed. I think that should be number one in any assignment. If you tell yourself you want to succeed, every other thing will follow. But if you are focused on succeeding and shun people's money, irrespective of God, it's not just money that is involved in corruption. When people are your relations, you should not start looking at people as my brothers or sisters or friends. You should be moving like a train in anti-corruption movement, especially in the area of counterfeit medicine.
The issue, the business of fake drugs is a big, big business. We're all here when Dora Akonyele, as the DG of NAFDAC, when she was fighting the menace of counterfeit drugs, we saw all the threats that she went through. They almost killed her driver, and all of that. So for people who are confident to come up and say that these people, there are people here who are involved in adulterated or fake drugs, we need to provide some form of protection for them so that they and their families are not exposed to threats, to dangers to their lives from people who are the ones peddling these drugs.
As the current effort unfolds, a socio-political group, Southern Nigerian People's Mandate, has weighed into the matter. In a statement signed by East President Augustine Chukundum and Secretary General Shegun Dia, the group pointed at Pakistan, China, India, and some other Asian countries as the sources of these fake drugs that have become a scourge in Nigeria.
Corruption is also part of what we are passing through, what the menace that is responsible for Nigeria being a dumping ground or any drug. And again, the economy of the country is another way. That's why you see a lot of drug. People want cheap drug, and most of these drugs that are being brought in, when you want to talk about the counterfeit and at the same time the fake drug, what is it? What is the definition of it? It's a drug that they are deliberately and fraudulently mislabeled. You understand, either in terms of their composition, of what the drug is contained, or at the same time mislabeling, misrepresentation.
The group said that NAFDAC itself should be the first agency that must be investigated in any meaningful effort to resolve the fake drugs challenge. According to the Southern People's Mandate, NAFDAC is running with the hare and hunting with the hound because NAFDAC officials give a seal of approval for the importation of these drugs and turn around to impound them. The group called on the president to investigate the customs, police, and the NDLEA, all of whose officers are at the entry port, get compromised by the drug dealers while the illicit and fake drugs take the lives of many Nigerians and frustrate medical practice in the country.
In order for us to curb this menace, because it is a menace and it has a global approach, it has a local approach. So the first and foremost thing that I think that we should do, increase our awareness campaign, so that people will know how to identify fake drugs when drugs are being distributed to them. Then we also need to engage a multi-sectoral approach in terms of Federal Ministry of Health, the Pharmaceutical Council of Nigeria, all of those people that are involved. The customs is also a stakeholder. Because like most of the drugs that we take in Nigeria, they are imported. And if they are imported, it means that they come in through our borders. And who are the people manning our borders? They are men and women of Nigerian Customs Service. So we also need to engage them so that when these drugs are seen, of course, they have to go through a training process for them to be able to identify which is counterfeit, which is adulterated, which is illegal, which one has expired. So with that training in mind, when these drugs come in, they will be able to identify that, oh, these ones they have already expired, these are counterfeit, these are banned drugs. They can seize them and then destroy them or burn them like we see them do on national television. So all of this, we have to do all of this. It's going to be a collaborative effort.
The agency actually responsible for that are doing, and we know the clampdown that NAFDAC is ongoing now. The essence is they are working in collaboration with the Pharmacy Council of Nigeria to streamline, have a central stock, you understand, have to clamp down on the open market and ensure that you want to get your product, you have a central regulation of drugs coming into the country. It still has to go through NAFDAC. Yes, they are the one that issue license. They check the integrity of the drug. They even have a lab where they carry out, you understand, check on the drug, carry out some tests on the products that is being brought in. And this track and trace method, technique that is out there, also is another process. There was a time where you have numbers being given, a code, that if you log in such numbers onto your phone, it authenticates the authenticity of a particular product. And I think NAFDAC is also still working in that regard.
Meanwhile, pharmacists have suggested that the demand by the NAFDAC DG, Professor Mojisola Christiana Adeyeye, for the National Assembly to amend the anti-narcotics and drug law to include either death or life sentence. The Director General of NAFDAC has suggested a stiffer law as a deterrent to the continued challenge of fake drugs in the country while speaking to the media at the presidential villa.
We use this opportunity to call on the National Assembly to expedite the amendment of the NAFDAC Act N1-LFN 2004 and the Counterfeit and Fake Drugs and Unwholesome Processed Food C-34 Act to include life sentence and death penalty in the penalties for crimes committed under these acts. This exercise that we are doing is purely an enforcement operation to protect the public and rid our country of falsified and substandard medical products.
Senate had proposed a bill in 2020 to extend to increase the jail term for people who are convicted to life imprisonment. I think if we're able to pass that bill, it will be good, because anyone who is convicted knows that he or she is going to prison for life. And then I think the fine that was being proposed in that proposed bill is 2 billion. I think it makes more sense, even though I still think that 2 billion cannot buy the life of any human being. So if we're able to get that bill passed, whoever is convicted goes behind the bar for his or her entire life. When we get more convictions and we talk about this, we make publicity, we ensure that these convictions are publicized such that everybody sees, everybody knows. I think it will serve as deterrent to people who are sitting down or who are lying in wait or who are in that business. They will know that it is no longer business as usual. And I think that this will help a great deal to curb the menace of counterfeit and fake drug adulteration of drug proliferation of drugs in Nigeria.
It is evident that the challenge of fake, illicit, and adulterated drugs in Nigeria reflect the challenge of corruption, weak and incompetent regulation, and a lack of political will to tackle the problem. If not, Nigeria should have put diplomatic pressure on countries from where these drugs are imported and sanctioned the leadership of customs, police, and NDLEA, who run after consignment of drugs on the roads after they have been led through the entry points. As the war on fake drugs, the innocent whose businesses and livelihoods are now suffering should not be sacrificed because of the failures of regulation and border.
For 10 days in the month of March, the door to allegations of corruption, abuse of power, torture, cruel and inhumane treatment of inmates against the Nigerian Correctional Service was thrown open to the public in Abuja. To say that some of the details that emerged were disturbing underplays the gravity of the situation. Correspondent Chimeze Nzedima, who with Nasiru Usman covered the 10 days public hearing, summarizes the high point of the investigative hearing.
There was a comforting outcome of the 10-day investigative public hearing by a panel set up by the Ministry of Interior. The outcome is that the ministry is willing to confront issues in Nigeria's correctional services without any effort to cover any failures. The second is that the investigative panel is not on a witch hunt, punitive voyage, or indictment, but is striving to understand the issues, the infractions, why they happen, and how to prevent them, and institute a new correctional culture.
The Nigerian Correctional Service have also seen this process as something that is going to be for their benefits, and they cooperated so well in dealing with all the issues that were raised. They mobilized staff from all over the country to come in and state their own cases as it is. So for us, I think is the trust that the service and even Nigerians have in this process that is quite encouraging to us.
3 major institutions came up again and again in the course of the 10-day public hearing: the police, the judiciary, and the correctional service. The practices by officers of these institutions came up for scrutiny in the investigation, arraignment, detention, and inhumane custodial conditions of inmates.
The issue of underage That's when a warrant has been sent to the prison officials, and they observe that the person committed in the warrant to be remanded, their opinions on the age, and by the provision of the Act, they have every right to reject it. So, in an attempt to solve or resolve this kind of problem, we should have cognizance to the fact that once a judge, either in the magistrate or high court, has issued a warrant for the remand of a suspect before him, has become an order of the court. Being an order of the court, therefore, he must have relied based on the information supplied. If it's a matter under magistracy, I believe the police, since they are here, they have to take note of this because they have more important role to play than the judiciary in this aspect. So what I'm saying is essence is that the police have a very important role to play in preparing their first information reports that they normally present to the FIR, to the magistrate court. Because the magistrate will now believe in the information content, and maybe if the accused denied the allegation, he may order his committed on remand, pending when they will bring their own cases. So once the warrant has been given to the officers, the officers on their own, say they have rejected or they will reject him on the grounds of underage, will definitely annoy the court. For any officer to attempt going back to the court to tell the judge, this guy is underage, because he is not in position to do that.
Nigerian Police Force, NDLE, Justice, you are us. They are all under you because you take care of judiciary and everybody. You need to understand what we are going through, keeping these students. They don't call them inmates, we call them students. I learned that on the field last week. Keeping these students in our correctional center. Maybe when we understand it, it will help us to go back to our various agencies to say, look, we need to rejig what we are doing because we are actually causing a lot of discomfort, not just to the correctional service, but also to those students.
Fingers pointed at the magistrate court in the detention of underage raised issues of whether the police and the courts were conscious of the rules governing juveniles who find themselves against the law. Was the National Judicial Institute, which provides training, doing enough to equip judges, and is the training of magistrates from where many are thrown into correctional centers adequate enough?
The mandate of the National Judicial Institute is to train judges and their support staff. So where we come in here is to help develop specialized training programs to equip, as you mentioned, magistrates and legal practitioners with the knowledge needed to identify and prevent human rights violations in detention facilities.
The public hearing was not all about inmates of correction centers or the process of them getting there. The correctional officers also had issues with the system. This ranged from abuse of power by senior officers of the service to mistreatment and denial of rights of the correctional officers. For instance, diligent correctional service officers found themselves in the bad books of their seniors for doing the right thing.
Now I will start. This is the initial complaint letter, which was dated 22/5/2018. I have submitted to the authorities since 2018. So on March 2018, 40,000 naira was deducted from my salary account for the month of March, April, and May. After complaining to them, 1,000 naira was also deducted for the month of August, September, and October. I complained about the deductions. He said I should hold on and look into the issue. So after looking into the issues, I was vindicated. 100,000 naira was returned to me on installments because the deduction was installment because 225,000 was taken out of my salary without my consent. So when I wrote this letter and the panel was set up, 100,000 was returned to me. That was when I received a menacing call from Abuja, from that Mr. Teslim Adedoja, who works with the then Prison Microfinance Bank, Lagos. He told me that they will pay me. He said they will pay me, but I will spend the money on transfers. That they will invite me to Abuja. I said, if you are inviting me to Abuja, send me transportation. I will come. That was the menacing call I received from him. I never took all these things so serious. If not, I would have recorded those things. By March 2019, as a result of this microfinance issue, I was transferred to Zone H Makurdi from Lagos with a radio message. I've not even spent up to 2 years at the zonal headquarters Lagos. From there, subsequent transfers started coming up. And the distance is much. I have not committed an offense. I have not done anything against correctional. Somebody will explain to me the next thing, I'll just see my name on transfer. Just like that. I agree that transfer is part of the service. You know, it's part of the job and it's specified in the public service rule and the conditions of transfer. But when transfer is frequent and does not adhere to the public service rules and regulation, it amounts to witch hunting. So that is why I came here, so that all the issues, my issues will be looked into and addressed, and I need to be relocated back to my family, and money is to be paid to me on all those transfers. Because I'm just tired. I don't know, I'm just tired.
And how does an officer handle a situation in which his superior, against all rules, treats an inmate as a king, rendering him services, providing aids and giving him special privileges?
On the 23rd of February, this IDRO by name Ifeanyi Nwaimo was taken to hospital. And for the very first time, I have never seen in the practice that a non-custodial staff will be deployed from the headquarters, and alongside 2 staffs, the orderly and the personal assistants, that is orderly and the driver, also accompanying this IDR. And 4 armed squads were drafted in. They took a white Hilux van that was provided for the state government, took this IDR to an hospital. I noticed something was wrong, but I couldn't figure it out as in charge discipline. But there is something that I really suspected, because there was no medical officer that actually accompanied them. These persons left the custodial center. And as usual, they have been going and coming back. We thought it would be on the usual basis that he goes and comes back. But that day, he left and never came back. There was a tension. He left by 8 o'clock.
This particular case, I issued a query to my officer in charge on why an inmate who is an IDRO should be taken to the hospital without informing the controller. And the officer in charge replied the query. And immediately after that, I quickly went into investigation. I called the inmate. I asked when they brought him to the yard. I asked where he was taken to. He said he was taken to the hospital, Federal Medical Center. I was not fully impressed. I still went to Federal Medical Center to find out from the doctor. And the doctor said, yes, he wrote that medical report, which he gave to the officer in charge to send to me when I was carrying out my investigation.
The welfare of the correctional officers was another issue that featured in the 10 days public hearing. How does the service justify the retirement of officers on the account of one of them, on the same rank, being appointed the Comptroller General of the service, and in the same breath, retaining some officers on a higher rank than the officers so appointed?
Our entitlement as Assistant Comptroller General retired were not given, some of our entitlement were not given to us. But the panel listened to it and asked the service to address that. 2, we have our something like repatriation allowance, but the one that concerns us most was the spirit of disengagement. If it is as a result of the appointment of our junior to become the Comptroller General, while we as senior should go, which has never happened in the service, why then do you have to stop our salary immediately? We have worked into half of the month, as if a personal vendetta is being expressed. We joined the service with the hope to retire peacefully, and we guided our career. How suddenly will you ask somebody to go, having wives, children, in higher institutions without any benefit.
The emotions which this issue raised were calmed by the chairperson of the investigative panel, Dr. Madeleine Ajani, who is also the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Interior. Like a Daniel, she came to judgment, assuring complainants of fairness and justice, and insisting that the correctional service must operate within its own rules and regulations.
Repatriation allowance, as you retire and you put in the application, we get it paid. It's not just Ministry of Interior, it's something that the federal service holds very dearly. Because it's just unfair for us to render 35 years of service, then your small chickily money to go back, even if you are not living in Abuja. It's something for you to start off with before your pension comes. And there's no reason why the service should deny you of it. It's your right. So please, whatever it is that we communicate to them to do, I promise you that we'll communicate it to you. What needs to be done needs to be done. Your repatriation fee has to be paid. So when they give us all the information of the things that you have not paid, if I must tell you, apart from 7 of you, there are other cases of retirees that have not received their cards. I read these letters when they come in, appeals, and we send it to the board because it is their jurisdiction to handle those cases. Okay, so aside from the 7 of you, there are other retirees that correctional service has not paid. But your own case is being looked at now. And there's no way where an officer will retire and 5 years after you've not been paid your repatriation allowance.
The responsibility of the correctional service to provide adequate feeding, and in some cases specialized feeding, was another issue of concern to the panel. As much as the feeding allowance for inmates has recently been increased, the increase was still inadequate, and the special needs of diabetic and other inmates needing special care are yet not factored in the feeding arrangements.
The panel went to some custodial centers. In all of the ones we went to, there was none which saw food up to 1 week. So the issue about having a store that is supposed to have at least 7 days thing, it's a practice that's difficult for this to be now implemented. You know that when an inmate is not given food, what danger that is. So if people, first, the amount that is provided is poor. Second, this process of profit making worsens the process. And secondly, you know that the officer in charge used to be one of that level of checks and balances for the contractors when the contractors were totally supplying food. So this is about being open to know where the problems are, to solve our problem, because many inmates are dying because of lack of food. I've never seen what we see these days. There have always been problems, but it has never been the way it is. Never. So as a people, we have to look at this square in the eye. So they're going to show you what is happening in the correctional centers these days. What is happening is inmates are not eating well. There's a lot of commercialization because everybody is now selling what you never used to see. Trying to cope. Those who can't afford to cope are dying. So we will look at what can be done to them. And that's where, before we go there, because it's obvious there are not adequate checks and balances, it's obvious. It has to happen.
The panel wondered if the correctional centers were institutions where the state gets its pound of flesh from inmates, or where inmates are corrected and given a second chance. This arose when the matter of training and rehabilitation was interrogated. It emerged that whereas the correction centers are supposed to be correctional institutions, equipment for preparing the inmates for return to society are either not available or are obsolete and dilapidated.
Doing this, there are three things, 3 major points. One is that the correctional centers do have the manpower in terms of the inmates. Two, some of these inmates are even knowledgeable in some of these things, repairs. Three, the Act, the Nigerian Correctional Service Act, had also spoken about the way part of the resources, the profit from the industries, should be divided into three. One part is what will be used to sustain that process, that enterprise. One part is to be given to the inmates as an incentive, those inmates that are there so that they can continue to learn skill. Another part to go back to the custodial center. So if this is done, that part that is supposed to be sustained can actually help. I gave you an example of one place we went to a workshop. The whole, we have a picture of it. The whole workshop is roof off. The carpentry workshop is on this side. Then you have shoemaking and all that. So the question here is about how you can turn this around in relation to maintenance culture, skills acquisition and training for inmates, and utilizing what you have. This is not about contracts. I'm talking about, but this is having the culture of maintenance.
Not only about maintenance culture, even though that is very, very important. Resourcefulness. There were things we observed in some facilities we visited. They have large number, over 1,000. But where they have for workshop or school is smaller than half of this podium. Not even smaller, about a quarter of this podium. And then when we were asking, they said there's no space. But we've been to other facilities like Orange, where they even had to put canopies outside for the people to school. But there was a big church we were saying, there could have been a makeshift arrangement that when the church is not in session, they can be able to use it as school. And I know those in your department can be able to build, even if it's demarcators, to ensure that those essential services are delivered innovatively within the space you have until money is available for you to build what you need to build.
As the investigative panel rounded up its 10-day sitting, there appeared to be silver lining in the horizon. There is a willingness to make the service to improve its operations and exit Nigeria for being the butt of every report on failure in correctional service delivery.
You are watching 360 Nigeria on Signature TV. We'll take a break and return shortly. Please stay with us.
Every second, every minute, every day, news is breaking. Events occur and there are new developments. At Signature TV, we follow these stories objectively, bringing all sides without bias, explaining the complex issues, breaking down the numbers, and investigating the issues behind the news. Anywhere and everywhere, near or far, wherever the news is, we will be there. Signature TV. News in your pocket.
Welcome back. Where is Daniel Kanu and his Association for Better Nigeria, ABN? Not many Nigerians will remember him today. Those who do remember him as a bad experience in Nigeria's political journey. Today, however, many Nigerians, including university students and even President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, remember and recall with fine memories one man, his service, and his unshaken stand for integrity, transparency, and credibility in Nigeria's political process. That man is Professor of Political Science from the University of Nigeria, Humphrey Nwosu. Last week, Professor Humphrey Nwosu was laid to rest in his hometown, Ajali, in Anambra State. Before then, believers in a free, fair, and credible election in Nigeria gathered at the Shehu Musa Air Adua Center in Abuja to pay tribute to Humphrey Nwosu. The event became a commentary on Nigeria's journey towards credible election. 360 Nigeria correspondent reports.
Why is it that evil does not leave any guiding footprints for the benefit of tomorrow? Maybe that is why Napoleon has no monument to his memory except a brandy that makes fools of men. That same way, Daniel Kano and his Association for Better Nigeria, a man and his organization who represent an evil in Nigeria's election history, are a piece of forgotten history. With a midnight court order obtained from the dark recess of a court chamber, Daniel Kano and his ABN were used to scuttle Nigeria's freest, fairest, and most credible election. Last week, Nigerians who believe in accountable democratic process, who believe in the free choice made and mandate given by Nigerian electorate, gathered in Abuja to pay their last respects to Mr. Option A4, Professor Humphrey Nwosu.
To the Nwosu family, we say, you have every reason to be proud of Professor Nwosu. He was a man of honor, a man of integrity, a man of tremendous capacity. Somebody who really knew what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, and he did it excellently. He was a chairman who chaired well.
Professor Nwosu and his team embarked on several initiatives. They took deliberate, intentional, courageous steps that culminated in the adoption of the now popular Option A4 voting system, the open ballot, and going forward, the modified open ballot system for the 1993 general presidential election. These initiatives worked so well, and the election also went very well. A widely held national consensus based on facts has continually affirmed that that June 12 election was not only free, fair, but a clear winner emerged. Regrettably, like it has been said since Professor Humphrey Nwosu's past, that everyone, beneficiaries of that election, have been recognized. The day has been recognized, but those who conducted the elections, those who worked tirelessly, remain unsung. But to us, they remain our unsung heroes.
We gather to honor a man whose name is written indelibly in the chronicles of Nigeria's search for democracy, justice, and good governance. We gather to pay tribute to Professor Humphrey Nwosu, scholar, reformer, and patriot whose life and work exemplify the rare courage it takes to do the right thing in a country that too often punishes virtue. For me, this moment is not just about mourning a loss, it is about preserving a legacy. It is about telling and owning our story, both as Ndibo and as Nigerians.
Professor Humphrey Nwosu did his job with the seriousness that it deserved, with the focus, with the passion, and at his heart, very clearly, with the interest of the nation at heart. What he did, no doubt, has contributed very, very significantly to the effort to bring integrity to elections in countries such as ours, to ensure that popular will prevails in the election of representatives of the people, and his leadership at NEC at that time clearly illustrated this commitment and this drive to ensure that things were done very well.
Professor Humphrey Nwosu was the chairman of the National Electoral Commission, NECO, under the military presidency of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida.
He was to conduct election to return Nigeria to democratic governance. He did, with sterling performance, destroying the myth of corruption in election, interference by power brokers, and manipulation of election outcome. Nigerians at the event remembered and thanked him.
Professor Humphrey Nwosu has been put on the map as a Nigerian of repute, a man that this country should say a big thank you to.
Professor Nwosu was, however, best known for his role as chairman of the National Electoral Commission. Having been appointed in 1989, he presided over the conduct of the June 12, 1993 elections that some still regard as the most open and transparent in Nigeria's history. He did not apply for the job, but applied himself fully to the task once he mounted the saddle of leadership. Although the results were announced, June 12 became a major reference point in Nigeria's electoral history and political discourse.
Professor Nwosu is a celebrated person who really produced the option A4. He wanted us to really come up with an option that cannot be cheated, that at the end of the elections, there will be the great honor that the elections will be conferred with that credibility. Not just by the people announcing, but the people who voted. Because when you announce the results, those who voted will know whether you are announcing what they voted or something else. Option A4 was designed to be very credible. And you know, it was excellent, produced one of the best results of elections in Nigeria, celebrated, highly honored, but to our surprise, the best elections were annulled. That was the most difficult day in our lives.
The tributes have reminded us not only of his place in Nigeria's democratic journey, but also of the personal courage it takes to do the right things under difficult circumstances. We have also heard virtually from two of Nigeria's global icons, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie and Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, whose reflections captured the far-reaching inspiration Professor Nwosu continues to provide to generations of Nigerians both at home and abroad.
Professor Humphrey Nwosu deservedly regarded as one of the main heroes of June 12. For us as a commission, we will forever cherish the enduring legacy he left behind. What are these legacies? There would be no independent National Electoral Commission as it is today if Professor Humphrey Nwosu had not done what he did between 1989 and 1993. At the time he came on board in 1989, coming from the history of electioneering in Nigeria, staff of the commission were not established civil servants. Employment was not gazetted. They were not in the establishments. And Prof said, no, we cannot have a system, a democratic institution, without having permanent staff. And he set out to work. And then the federal government approved, and we started having the staff of the commission as pensionable staff. And most of us are beneficiaries of that today. Secondly, he also had saddled on him the responsibility of relocating the headquarters of the commission from Lagos to Abuja. And he set up a committee. Professor Humphrey Nwosu set up a task force for the relocation and charged them that the staff of the commission must be adequately accommodated. The building the commission occupies today as its national headquarters in Maitama was secured and built by Professor Humphrey Nwosu. The former commission's headquarters was in Area 10. He built it while we were still in Lagos. While we were contemplating relocation to Abuja, the task force said, secure any land, we will build. And he built. When Professor Humphrey Nwosu lays his hat to doing anything, not even the military can stop him.
I'm very, very happy and pleased to see that friends are gathering, and family and friends are gathering in order to celebrate his legacy. And I have no doubt, I think, unfortunately, in our country, we seem very slow and hesitant in rewarding national heroes. And I consider Professor Nwosu's contribution and the courage to withstand what I can call the intrigues of military rulers trying to stay and perpetuate themselves in power, really something that is very heroic and that deserves to be appropriately appreciated and recognized and honored in our country.
Between Daniel Kano and today's Nigeria is a spectrum. In between, there have been the NADECO, the 1 million man march, elections that produced presidents. Political players in this time seem to belong to the real Democrats, the fence-sitters, the pretenders, and the opportunists. At the day of tributes for Professor Humphrey Nwosu in Abuja, it appeared that those who believe in genuine democracy were either present or represented. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu was conspicuously absent, not even a delegation from him. The Abiolas were not counted. NADECO was nowhere, even its former followers and members. These who did not show up, are they fence-sitters, pretenders, or opportunists? However, those who believe in what Professor Humphrey Nwosu did for Nigeria's democratic journey said he should be honored and immortalized.
I hereby call on the Federal Republic of Nigeria, led by the President, to, as a matter of honor and respect, give honor to whom honor is due. At least we have heard from the Secretary of INEC that it was Humphrey that saw to the building of the current headquarters of INEC. Why not name that headquarters Humphrey?
Prof should be given Commander of the Federal Republic or Commander of the Order of the Niger. In addition, a national democratic or electoral institution like the Independent National Electoral Commission building should be named after him, because he did not only lay the foundation for a modern democracy, he also erected that physical structure there. No person can be more befitting to be named after the building of Independent National Electoral Commission.
I conclude by speaking to the powers that be. Humphrey Nwosu must be recognized and honored.
If a laborer is worthy of his wages, Humphrey Nwosu deserves a handsome wage. That is, if those who should pay will listen and hearken.
With the experience of Nigerians in elections after Professor Humphrey Nwosu, many today ask the question, when will another Humphrey Nwosu come? The answer is in the belly of time. For now, that's how we conclude today's episode of 360 Nigeria. We promise to be back next week. I am Josephine Bitrus, wishing you a great week ahead. Bye. See you next week.
360 Nigeria, tracking issues in the polity.